funding. I'm not going to actually be talking about execution labs specifically, but more broadly about funding and finance in the game industry. I'm guessing most people up here are familiar with execution labs as an early stage investor for game companies who've done almost 25 deals now. Some of them in Montreal, like Kitbox and Outer Minds and Northspell and Double Valley and so on. But most of the teams that we've invested in are actually from either outside of Montreal or even outside of Canada. So we've had quite a bit of experience, both in terms of receiving pitches from developers looking for funding, but also then working with those developers to get more funding. Because as an early stage investor, it's rare that the money that we provide is enough money, right? But, we'll get into the details of stages and stuff, but there's usually always additional, whether it's investors or publishers providing additional funding and support. So working with teams to go and get more money is a big part of what we do. And then also as investors ourselves, we need to get money from someone else. I am not an oil baron or independently rich. So then we go out and find the big sort of whales that have the deep pockets to give us funding. So we ourselves have to go out to the world and get funding from you. As a first bit of advice, whenever I talk about funding, they say that the best time to take someone else's money is never, and then the second best time to take someone else's money is when you don't need it, which is rarely the case in terms of the thinking of most developers, right? They mostly go get it when they're desperate, when they need it, and that sort of oftentimes leads to problems. We'll get into that. All right, so I mean, we're in Montreal here, so everyone knows who Phil Fish is. I do quite a lot of lectures all over the world, and basically everybody knows who Phil Fish is. So I kind of use him as sort of a symbol for the romantic notion of what it means to be an independent developer, an indie studio, right? That you're a visionary and you struggle and magic happens and then the riches come and fame and fortune and all this kind of stuff. And certainly that does happen and it has happened, but that's, I wouldn't say it's purely by chance, but it's not necessarily something you can automatically plan for. Now, when I talk about funding, I'm talking about cases where you are thinking about it as a business, right? And that's not necessarily true for everyone. Not everyone who's making games necessarily sees themselves as a business person or wants to do it to make money. They do it because it's their craft or it's their canvas to express themselves, and that's valid and powerful and part of what makes games as an art form meaningful. But if you want to be a starving artist, no one's going to give you money to be a starving artist if those are your ideals. So there is a bit of a disconnect from the kind of romantic nature of what it means to be, independent and creating and so on, versus like we're building an actual business. And so oftentimes there's some confusion over, what is indie or who is indie, and when you're talking about indie publishers or indie investors, what does indie mean? And there's oftentimes a lot of confusion over what the definition of indie is. So I'll give you my definition of indie, and the way I sort of parse it is with this kind of quadrant system with two axes for creative freedom and legal freedom. So on the vertical axes, it's really a question of to what degree as a creator, as a developer, do you have creative freedom? Do you have to work on the next Assassin's Creed, which means you don't have creative freedom because some boss at Ubisoft says make the next Assassin's Creed, or are you creating things that you want to create your own ideas, your own IP? And then legal independence in terms of, are you your own entity? Are you your own company or corporation? Or are you a subsidiary or owned by some other company? Or are you, on the stock market or whatever? So to what extent, as a legal structure, are you independent? So we can start placing folks along here. So I put work for hire outsource studios here. So you're legally independent. You're a standalone company doing art outsourcing, but you don't have creative freedom because Wargaming says, make me 20 tanks. Right? You're a service provider doing work for hire. So you're legally independent, but not creatively free. Down here would be internal studios, right? So the Assassin's Creed team or whatever goes here. That's kind of the worst situation, meaning you're not legally independent because you're part of an existing corporation or whatever, and you have no creative freedom because we told you make the next Assassin's Creed, so you're down here. Up in this one is a more rare situation called what I call the Skunk Works, or like an R&D division. So, I don't know, let's say at Ubisoft, they have a team of 10 people working with a Vive, figuring out VR stuff. So they say, okay, go off in the closet for 6 months and just figure stuff out. And so you have freedom to explore and work on stuff. No boss is telling you, make me VR assassins, but you don't have legal freedom because you're a division or department within Ubisoft. And so indies go here, right? So indies are legally independent or legally free. They're their own structure, their own entity, and then they also have creative freedom. They're working on their own ideas and own IP. Now, in that definition of indiness, there's nothing that says it has to be, on Steam or retro graphics or chiptunes or or big or small or makes money or doesn't make. It's really just to what extent you have creative freedom and legal independence. Now we can take that, everyone who qualifies as indie and break them down further into two more axes. So now we're taking everyone who has creative freedom and legal independence. We're forgetting about everyone else, and we're breaking them down further to indies who have commercial intent and vision. So commercial, the vertical axis is commercial intent, meaning to what extent are you actually doing this to make money, generate revenue, and so on. And then also vision is kind of my catch-all term for what you're doing is actually interesting, innovative, compelling, aesthetically pleasing, pushing some kind of boundary. We'll just call that vision. And so we can start placing folks. So this is where the starving artist would go. Right? They have vision, they're doing something amazing. It's a poem game to my dead grandmother or something. But I'm not doing it with commercial intent. I'm doing it because games are my canvas and I'm honoring my old grandmother or whatever. So starving artists go here. Sellouts, what I call sellouts or copycats go here, meaning they have commercial intent, they want to make money, but what they're doing is not visionary, right? It's a Candy Crush clone, or a Castle Crashers, or not, whatever, Clash of Clans clone or whatever. So they're working on what they want to work on, it's their own ideas, they have legal independence, they have commercial intent, but they lack vision. So it's also the clones and stuff like that. The folks down here are just lost. Right? They have no vision and no commercial intent. They're just kind of, now that might be students, it might be, amateurs, it might be folks that are just getting started and they're kind of trying to figure out, where do they fit, but they're kind of, they're wandering, they're lost. And then up here is the interesting one. This is what I would call the independent entrepreneurs, right? They're doing something with the intent to make money, the commercial intent, but they're doing visionary work. As an investor, that is the only quadrant I care about. Right? If we go back to the other quadrants, I'm not investing in work-for-hire studios. Nobody does because it's a low-margin business. I'm not investing in starving artists because they have no commercial intent. I don't care about the students that are wandering and lost, or the sellouts. I don't care about because if you're making a Candy Crush clone, your actual chances of making money are pretty slim, even though you want to, and it's just not interesting to us. And so, as investors, we're really looking for those entrepreneurs, the independent entrepreneurs that have that commercial intent and vision. So, who might be some of those examples? Everyone know who that is? Rami's map, half of Vlambeer. No one would question that the work that Vlambeer does is innovative and interesting and compelling and fun, really awesome games, but these guys make a crap ton of money. And Rami is probably the most annoyingly aggressive hustler there is, but everyone loves him because he's also helpful and he does good work. But that guy is a real hustler. Nathan Vella from Cappy, right in Toronto, also one of the co-founders of Indie Fund, really shrewd, really smart business person. Again, no one would question that the games that they work on, like Sword and Sorcery, being really a masterpiece, the work they're doing isn't visionary and innovative, but also doing it with commercial intent. Genova Chen, right? Flow, Flower, Journey, mean, Journey is a masterpiece, visionary work, but those guys are making a crap ton of money. They got, I think, 5 or 6 million of VC money from the Valley about 2 years ago. They had a 3-project deal from Sony coming straight out of school. So very shrewd business people. Jonathan Blow, of course, everyone knows John. I mean, Tim Schafer, of course, everyone knows Tim. So these people are out there, right? Meaning you can do visionary, compelling, amazing work, but doing it in context of commercial viability. That being said, there is no pot of gold over the rainbow. So many developers we talk to, they know they're going to need money or funding at some point, and they just say, well, there's people with money, we're just going to, we're going to go over there and get it when we need it. And they don't really understand the models and who's funding and at what levels and why, and it's just this kind of imaginary, there's a leprechaun somewhere with all the money, and when I need it, I'm going to go chase, and no one ever catches the leprechaun. So first thing is to think about whether or not, or between which is it you're funding, your project or your company. And how you go about funding your project versus your company is completely different. The sources of funding, the types of contracts, the terms, how you pitch it, everything is different depending on whether you're funding a project and company. And almost every pitch that we've received, nobody is clear which one it is they're pitching. They just need money from the pot of gold over on the other side and give me some money. They're not really thinking about whether it's, wait a second, am I funding my project or am I funding my company? We're talking about investors or funding, you're really weighing the money against 2 factors, right? At the beginning I said the best time to take someone's money is never, so the money doesn't come for free, so it's really a question of economics and control, that you're giving up some amount of economics and control for that money. So we're going to step through these elements. All right, so we have 2 columns, project versus, I guess the projector is not, this is not going to go well with All right, well, you just have to pay close attention. All right, so in terms of economics, this says revenue share versus equity stake. If you're taking on funding for your project, the likely economic thing you're giving up is some share of revenue. And that's, I think most people are familiar with that if they've done publisher deals or taken CMF funding, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas a company, it's equity, it's the shares in your company. That's the thing of economic value that you're giving in exchange. So it's equity, it's not revenue share. On control, generally this is IP control versus board control. So on the project column, what you're generally giving up from a control point of view is some degree of control over the IP. That might be a publisher that says, well, if it's a success, then I get sequel rights, or if it's a success, I get merchandising rights, or I have video rights on certain marketing plans or whatever. It depends on how much leverage you have and how good of a negotiator you are. But generally, a publisher or someone who's giving you project financing is invoking some amount of control over that IP. Whereas if I'm an equity investor, I'm mainly taking some amount of control of the board. Usually, I mean, it's not complete control unless you're a dummy and sell 100% of your company. Usually, investors take a minority stake, which gives them a minority amount of control. And so, there's always fear that if you take on an equity investor, you're losing control of your company, which is not usually the case. But it's board, it's about control of the voting shares of the board of the company. And then sort of the perspective, this says go to market, and this says growth. So if I'm a project investor, I'm really thinking about ultimately getting that project to market. Why? Because my economics are based on the revenue share. So I want that game to be out to generate revenue, and then my economics come rolling in. So the pressure is really about getting the game out, or getting the game as awesome as possible to maximize revenue when it gets out. It's all about the market. Whereas if I'm an investor in the company, I'm thinking much longer term. I'm thinking much higher level about how do we build value in the company over a long period of time. It's about growth of the company. Because I'm thinking about who's going to buy the company, or how's the company going to go public, or how's the company going to generate dividends over the long term. It's a much different perspective than I'm a publisher helping you get to market because I want revenue share. On the project funding side, oh jeez, this is not helping me. I think it's the project. Oh, yeah, that worked. That's fine. That's perfect. Yeah. Smart people working on everything. All right. So on the project funding side, again, most people are familiar with these. I won't really spend much time on this. Probably many of you have done several of these. From using your credit card, which I don't advise. Winning festival and contest prizes, which is a nice bonus when you get them, but not exactly something you can budget for. From a pre-funding point of view, banks are rarely a source of upfront funding, although on a longer-term basis, of course, we're very valuable partners. Obviously, we're in Canada, in Montreal, so a lot of government programs there to support us. Publishers, to this day, remain still one of the largest, if not the largest, source of project-based financing in the game industry. For all the sort of negativity around publishers or whatnot. Crowdfunding, of course, we're all familiar with. Alpha pre-sales on early access is quite popular. Although, not everyone succeeds at that. Obviously, there are some people who do, and then everyone else thinks they'll be as successful as those ones and are not. As a rule of thumb, we do not consider early access as a sort of viable source of production funding, right? We normally see it as an expense. Being in early access usually costs you 20% more time, budget, resources to just manage the community, do all the updates and so on. If you get lucky and you have something that truly resonates, like a castle story or like H1Z1 or DayZ, okay, fine, then you'll get millions of dollars. That's quite a rare. You're sort of an exclusive club. There's not many that have been able to generate that level of revenue. And then friends and family and so on is pretty common. There's a whole day's workshop to dig into how to pitch publishers and how to apply for all the different government programs and all that kind of stuff. So we won't really spend time there. On the let's see. All right. So normally I do this step by step. So because I have awesome animations and stuff, but so this graph now applies to equity financing. So you're financing your company. And the sources of funding, the amounts, and so on depend on the stage your company is in, often related to revenue/profit. So this graph here is time, vertical axis is, I call it profit, so 0, and the blue line kind of represents your profitability as a company. That may all happen in 1 year, it may take you 10 years, so time is relatively elastic, it's really about the blue curve. So in the beginning, when you're spending all your money, it's just burn, you don't have a product, you're not generating revenue, the sources of funding are what we call the 3 Fs, friends, family, and fools. Or what you might also call love money, which meaning only someone who loves you will give you money this early on, when it's an idea and a couple of buddies and you're just burning cash. So it's your mom, it's your rich uncle, it's your spouse, it's yourself. The next stage, it's angels, still relatively small, 50, 250K. The problem with Canada is there are not many angels, and the game industry as a whole, there are angels investing in games, but it's not like in Silicon Valley or sort of tech in general, where there's angels everywhere, so they're hard to come by. Then there's early stage or seed VCs in this kind of sub 1 million range. And the important point is, this is the crossover point when you go from a pure burn to actually making revenue. So seed VCs are still investing in you based on hype, on potential, on buzz, on your track record, because you haven't yet delivered the product to generate revenue. So they're taking a risk. They're coming in early, but they believe in you and the team and the vision and so on. Then once you've crossed that point where now you're actually generating revenue or profits, then you have more of the normal VCs that are putting in a couple of million, or at a later stage of growth VCs or private equity investors where now it's, you're generating 10 million a year of revenue and they're going to give you 20 million to make, double the revenue. It's like you're really sort of amplifying success at that point. There should be two other lines, which is check size